Victor Sterling's perfectly sculpted smile never wavered, even as his words publicly stripped Sarah Maxwell of her 17 years of expertise. "We need to accelerate, Sarah, not drown in your bureaucratic minutiae," he declared, waving a dismissive hand at her flagged $12 million liability. Sarah felt a cold dread, not for herself, but for the company about to blindly step into the legal chasm she'd meticulously identified. This wasn't agility, it was a corporate train rushing headlong towards a cliff. Sarah Maxwell watched the digital clock tick, each second a slow drip of corporate decay. 17 years she'd been the quiet guardian of Apex Solutions, the unseen firewall shielding it from legal infernos and regulatory quicksand. She knew every clause, every potential pitfall, every hidden liability lurking in the small print. Her reputation was built on meticulousness, her integrity unimpeachable. Until Victor Sterling arrived. Victor, the new VP of Strategy, swept into Apex like a slick, well-oiled machine, charisma plastered over a deep-seated contempt for anything that wasn't fast or scalable. He spoke in buzzwords, his perfectly coiffed head barely nodding when Sarah tried to explain the intricate web of indemnities in the upcoming acquisition. "Sarah," he'd announced in a departmental meeting, his gaze sweeping past her to land on the impressionable Leo Finch, his newly appointed, shockingly inexperienced junior, "we need to be agile. Compliance is a hurdle, not a finish line. We're in the business of deals, not nitpicking." Leo, a fresh-faced graduate whose biggest contribution so far was color-coding spreadsheets, nodded vigorously, utterly oblivious. The subtle sidelining began immediately. Her emails, once prioritized, went unanswered. Meetings where she traditionally held court were now held without her, decisions made on the fly, critical clauses she'd fought tooth and nail to embed mysteriously vanishing from drafts. She'd find them later, gone, replaced by vague generalities that offered Apex little to no protection. "Just streamlining, Sarah," Victor would say, a condescending smirk playing on his lips, Leo's taken point on the documentation. "Fresh eyes, fresh perspective, you understand." Sarah understood. She understood Victor saw her experience as an anchor, her diligence as a defect. She was a relic, the ghost of Christmas obsolete, as a colleague's murmured comment had tragically summarized in a momentary lapse. One Tuesday morning, the summons arrived. A sterile calendar invite, performance review, Victor Sterling. No agenda. No pre-read. Just a time and a conference room. She walked in to find Victor sitting opposite her, a stoic HR representative by his side. There was no preamble, no soft landing. "Sarah," Victor began, his voice devoid of his usual performative charm, "we're taking Apex in a new direction. A leaner, more dynamic structure. Unfortunately, your role, as currently defined, doesn't align with our strategic vision." It was a dismissal, cold and blunt, delivered with the practiced ease of someone who'd rehearsed it countless times. 2 weeks severance pay. Immediate escort from the building. No goodbyes, no lingering questions. Her 17 years of loyalty, her unwavering commitment to protecting the company, dissolved into a 2-minute corporate euphemism. She felt a strange lightness and unexpected clarity amidst the shock. As she packed her personal items, the small collection of framed photos and the ergonomic mouse she'd grown to love, a quiet, almost defiant thought solidified. She didn't owe them anything, not anymore. But she owed herself and her professional integrity one last act. Before IT could lock her out, Sarah opened her personal secure drive. With the precision of a surgeon, she downloaded every critical compliance document, every flagged discrepancy, every email chain detailing Victor's cavalier disregard for risk. She organized them meticulously, cross-referencing, dating, creating an unassailable digital fortress of truth. She named the archive Sarah's safety net. A quiet, unshakable certainty settled within her. This story, she knew, was far from over. And when the inevitable crash came, she would have her proof. Sarah Maxwell discovered a surprising tranquility in her enforced solitude. No more pre-dawn email alerts, no frantic calls dissecting arcane regulatory texts, no Victor Sterling's dismissive sneer echoing in her mind. Her mornings now began with sunlight streaming into her organized apartment, not the sterile glow of a corporate monitor. She rediscovered forgotten hobbies, meticulously categorized her extensive book collection, and even cultivated a small herb garden on her balcony, an antithesis to the chaotic corporate jungle she'd been ripped from. This was the peace she'd craved, the quiet reward for 17 years spent as the unyielding firewall no one appreciated until the flames licked too close. The ghost of Christmas obsolete, she'd heard someone once quip about experienced, slow professionals like her. She chuckled, a wry, bittersweet sound. She was free. She owed no one anything. Or so she told herself. The initial bliss, like a perfectly brewed cup of tea, began to cool. The silence, once comforting, occasionally felt hollow. Her phone, initially ignored, started to buzz with unfamiliar numbers and then familiar ones. First, Olivia Reed, her former cubicle mate, a nervous tremor in her voice. "Sarah, is that you? Listen, things here are a mess. Especially with the acquisition due diligence. So many blanks. Remember that indemnity clause for the European assets? It's just gone. No one knows where to find the original sign-offs. Victor's saying you removed it before you left." A sharp intake of breath on Olivia's end. Sarah's jaw tightened. She had removed nothing. She had flagged it repeatedly. Then came Ethan Cross, from legal. His tone was clipped, desperate. "Sarah, they're pushing through deals with half-baked agreements. Everything you documented, the critical risk assessments, it's like it never existed for them. Leo Finch is signing off on things that would make a first-year intern blanch. I overheard Victor bragging about streamlining compliance by cutting red tape. Sarah, people are going to get burned." The familiar ache in her chest returned, a professional reflex. Her safety net archive, a silent testament to her diligence, flashed in her mind. But the anger was stronger. They fired her, discarded her like yesterday's news. Let them burn. This wasn't her circus, not anymore. The hot comment sentiment resonated deeply. If she was fired, she doesn't owe anyone assistance. It was a mantra she repeated, a shield against the rising tide of concern. Let Victor Sterling clean up his own mess. Yet, the questions gnawed. A crucial indemnity clause missing? The potential for a multi-million-dollar liability ignored? The very fabric of corporate integrity being shredded by reckless ambition. It wasn't just about Victor or Leo. It was about the company, the shareholders, the unwitting employees who would suffer the fallout. Her professional core, honed over decades, rebelled against the chaos. She had built her career on preventing such disasters, on seeing the cracks before they became chasms. Now she was outside the walls, watching the structure crumble, knowing she held the blueprints to its stability. The struggle was palpable, the bitter taste of vindication, watching Victor's inevitable downfall against the deep-seated, almost involuntary urge to fix what was broken, to uphold the very principles they had fired her for defending. Her phone buzzed again, a new voicemail icon blinking insistently. The quiet life, it seemed, was beginning to demand a price. The voicemail light on Sarah's phone pulsed like a persistent, unwelcome thought. She had intentionally let the calls from Olivia and Ethan go to voicemail, a small act of defiance against the professional world that had discarded her. Her quiet mornings were sacrosanct now, filled with the scent of brewing coffee and the rustle of newspaper pages, not the frantic ping of Slack notifications. She scrolled through her calendar, intending to clear an old placeholder. An email, innocuously titled Project Horizon Follow-Up, caught her eye. It was from a generic corporate email address, not her old company's. Must be an automated reminder for something I was looped into before I left, she mused, thinking of a compliance review she'd spearheaded months ago. It seemed innocuous enough, a quick check-in for documentation that surely needed her touch anyway. A pang of her former meticulousness, a reflex she thought she'd buried, made her click the link. The Zoom room loaded quickly, revealing a grid of unfamiliar, serious faces. No Olivia, no Ethan, no one from her old department. The corporate logo in the top corner wasn't Apex Innovations, her former employer, but the stark, modern emblem of Viridian Capital, the acquiring company. Her stomach dropped. This wasn't a casual follow-up. This was their meeting. Her eyes darted to her own displayed name, a private joke she'd set up weeks ago for her personal archive, Sarah's safety net. A cold dread settled in her chest. A sharp, silver-haired woman, presumably Viridian's lead counsel, Ms. Eleanor Vance, cleared her throat. And as you can see, the indemnity clause regarding the legacy intellectual property dispute remains conspicuously absent from the revised merger documents. Mr. Sterling's team assures us it was boilerplate, but our initial review from Apex's internal audit trails clearly shows Maxwell flagged it as a high-priority risk. Ms. Maxwell? Eleanor's gaze, piercing and direct, landed squarely on Sarah's avatar. Sarah froze. They were discussing her flagged clause, the very one Victor Sterling had scoffed at, deeming it an impediment to his deal velocity. The one that represented a potential $12 million liability if the IP dispute escalated post-acquisition. The one that, in her final weeks, had simply vanished from the documents she was meant to approve. A bead of sweat traced a path down her spine. The old indignation flared. Asterisk, they fired me for this. They ignored me. And now they're in a mess they created. Asterisk, a voice inside her screamed. Asterisk, don't help them. Let them flounder. You owe them nothing. Asterisk, she had embraced the ghost of Christmas obsolete role they had cast her in, a forgotten, irrelevant entity. Yet, staring at the screen, at the professional dismay on Viridian's legal team's faces, her core programming as a firewall began to hum. It wasn't about Apex anymore. It was about the integrity of the process, the systemic risk, the sheer negligence. Ms. Maxwell. Eleanor prompted again, a hint of impatience in her tone. Are you with us? Your name appears on several crucial audit tags related to the original drafting of this clause. Sarah swallowed. Yes, I'm here. Her voice felt rusty. I was under the impression this was a different call. My apologies. She paused, gathering her resolve. This was a professional breach, yes, but the potential consequences were enormous. $12 million isn't boilerplate MS. Vance, she stated, her voice gaining strength, the familiar steel returning to her tone. It was a critical liability transfer requiring specific escrow protection, identified during the initial due diligence for Project Horizon. Without it, Viridian Capital would inherit the full financial burden. A ripple went through the virtual room. Eleanor's eyes narrowed, not with anger, but with intense interest. Indeed. And you flagged this? I did, Sarah confirmed. Repeatedly. The clause, along with supporting documentation for the IP dispute, should have been in Section 4.3.2 of the acquisition agreement. It involved a pending litigation settlement that was far from resolved. My final version, prior to my departure, included it. She hesitated for a fraction of a second, the internal battle still raging. But the professional demanded precision. I maintain a personal archive of my work. Comprehensive. Unaltered. Eleanor Vance leaned forward, a slow, knowing smile touching her lips. A personal archive, Ms. Maxwell? Containing references, perhaps. The subtle emphasis on references was a clear invitation. Sarah met her gaze, a quiet spark igniting within her. Yes, Ms. Vance. Pristine copies. If it would assist your team in verifying the original intent and the subsequent discrepancies, I would be happy to share my references. The phrase, a euphemism for her meticulously kept Sarah's safety net of files, felt like a gauntlet thrown. A collective sigh of relief, subtle yet palpable, seemed to ripple through Viridian's team. This wasn't about vindication yet, not fully. It was about professional integrity compelling her to prevent a disaster. Her quiet re-engagement had begun, not with a bang, but with the measured, undeniable truth of her archived work. Sarah Maxwell, a silent, almost spectral presence in the virtual conference room, began her methodical presentation. She didn't grandstand, didn't gloat. She simply shared her screen, a digital tableau of meticulously time-stamped documents. Here, she began, her voice steady, is the original draft of the acquisition agreement from 6 months ago, predating my departure. Note Section 4.3, subsection V, indemnity clause regarding legacy environmental liabilities. It explicitly transfers responsibility for an estimated $12 million in potential cleanup costs to the acquiring entity, contingent on our internal audit findings. She highlighted the paragraph in green. This was my final approved version. Then, with a click, she brought up the version submitted for the buyer's due diligence, a document she had never seen until now. The screen blared red. And here is the corresponding section in your current documentation. Section 4.3, subsection V, has been entirely removed. Vanished. As has the crucial escrow protection for unforeseen legal challenges outlined in Appendix C, which I also flagged. Her presentation was surgically precise, each click a cut through the layers of corporate deceit. She systematically laid bare a trail of alterations, showing how vital safeguards she had instituted the very firewall had been painstakingly dismantled in her absence. The digital dust settled, but the tremors from Victor Sterling's desperate, self-incriminating actions reverberated through the corporate world. The buyer's general counsel, a woman named Anya Sharma known for her surgical precision, wasted no time. An emergency virtual conference was convened, attended not by the usual dealmakers, but by the highest echelons of both companies. The air crackled with a tension Sarah could almost feel even from the quiet solitude of her home. Anya's message was unequivocal, her voice calm but steel-edged. The acquisition was stalled indefinitely. Our forensic audit has confirmed material misrepresentations. We are no longer discussing an acquisition. We are discussing corporate negligence, if not outright fraud. The silence on the seller's side was deafening. Then, Anya delivered the ultimatum, a statement that sliced through the pretense of negotiation like a scalpel. We have identified the only path forward. The deal will only proceed if Sarah Maxwell is formally reinstated as the oversight lead for this transition. And I mean full scope of influence, no compromises, no internal roadblocks. She dictates the terms. Anything less, and we walk. And then we talk to our regulators. A strange calm descended upon Sarah. The phone call from her former CEO, once a source of bitter resentment, now held a different weight. He stammered, apologized profusely, offered exorbitant figures, desperate to salvage the deal. Sarah, however, remembered the cold dismissal, the 2 weeks' pay, the casual cruelty. Her terms were simple: an independent consultancy agreement, triple her previous salary, a dedicated team, and absolute autonomy. Most importantly, Victor Sterling, Leo Finch, and David Miller were to be removed from any project related to the acquisition, effective immediately. There was no room for negotiation. Days later, Sarah re-entered the gleaming, glass-walled boardroom, not as an employee clinging to her tenure, but as a sentinel. The atmosphere was palpably different. Heads that had once dismissed her with a wave of a hand now bowed slightly in acknowledgement. Victor Sterling was conspicuously absent. Rumor had it he was on indefinite leave, a corporate euphemism for a rapid, irreversible descent. Leo Finch had been quietly reassigned to a remote, inconsequential department, his youthful ambition now crushed under the weight of his own incompetence. Even David Miller, her former manager who had stood by passively as she was ousted, was nowhere to be seen, having been transitioned out of his role. Sarah took her place at the head of the conference table, a position she had earned not through politicking, but through unwavering integrity. Her presentation was succinct, yet devastatingly thorough. She didn't gloat, she didn't even raise her voice. With the same meticulous precision that had defined her career, she presented her meticulously recrafted compliance documents, integrating all the necessary safeguards, the $12 million liability clause now prominently restored, the escrow protection ironclad. Each slide was a testament to the unassailable truth she had preserved. There were no grand pronouncements, no dramatic flourishes. Just irrefutable facts, undeniable data. The room watched, spellbound, as she systematically dismantled every risk, every potential pitfall, building a new, secure foundation for the deal. The buyer's team nodded in approval, their faces reflecting a mixture of relief and respect. Her former company's executives, humbled and pale, could only offer strained smiles and murmured agreements. As the meeting concluded, Sarah allowed herself a small, almost imperceptible smile. Her power wasn't in aggressive posturing or charismatic speeches. It was in the quiet, unyielding strength of her work, in the meticulousness that had once been dismissed as slowing deals. She was the firewall, the silent protector who had saved them not by shouting, but by simply ensuring her truth, her unerasable work, stood as the ultimate, undeniable truth. The victory was sweet, made sweeter by its quiet, undeniable certainty.